In the Middle Ages, a new civilization was forged on the European continent. Nobles and kings, faith and warfare, culture and learning, trade and innovation, these set the foundations of the modern era. This is the story of how Europe was born. In the first 2 centuries CE, the vast Roman Empire engulfed the Mediterranean Sea. It was a time of stability, prosperity, and peace, the Pax Romana. Citizens enjoyed its flourishing culture, fair quality of life, and relative security. This was achieved through Rome's centralized government and advanced infrastructure. In the remote eastern margins of the empire, a new religion was born, Christianity. Beginning as a small Jewish sect, it slowly spread throughout the pagan Roman world. In the 4th century, it was embraced by the emperors, becoming the official state religion. But by then, Rome's glory days were over. The empire was suffering from inflation, plagues, famine, and invasions. Managing it from a single center was becoming impossible. In 395 CE, the empire was divided in 2, a Western empire with Rome as its capital, and an Eastern one ruled from Constantinople, also known as the Byzantine Empire. While the East was urban, rich, and prosperous, the West was rural, poor, and weak. It didn't last long. In the deep forests beyond the empire's borders, barbarian peoples were on the move. These were mostly Germanic tribes led by warlords and their loyal bands of warriors. These groups were pressing harder and harder on the Rhine and Danube rivers. Without much choice, the Western Empire began allowing them entry. Eventually, the frontiers were breached, enabling various peoples to migrate and settle within the borders of the empire. Whether guests or invaders, these peoples carved up Roman territory while imperial authority was crumbling. In 476, the barbarian leader Odoacer deposed the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustulus. This child emperor had no real power, but his removal stands as a milestone. The Western Roman Empire was no more. The so-called Dark Ages had begun. Romans, Christians, barbarians, these were the 3 main ingredients that combined to create medieval Europe. Around 500 CE, Europe was covered by newly established kingdoms ruled by barbarian kings. Their elites, emerged between Romans and barbarians, had gradually converted to Christianity. The most prominent kingdoms were those of the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Visigoths in Spain, and the Franks in Gaul. But these kingdoms were lacking key elements necessary to manage successful states. The great cities of antiquity were depopulated, some left in ruins. The Roman transportation system decayed, eroding communication and long-distance trade. Coins vanished, leaving no economic system to support professional armies. Literacy plummeted, crippling administrative systems. And most notably, peace and security were gone. This impoverished rural West was becoming more and more localized, fragmenting politically and linguistically. In the first centuries of the Middle Ages, it paled in comparison to its stronger neighbors. In the 6th century, Byzantine Emperor Justinian I strove to reconquer the West and restore the Roman Empire to its past grandeur. But after conquering Italy from the Romanized Ostrogoths, the peninsula fell prey to new invaders, the Lombards. The Byzantines had to accept that the division between East and West was final. But soon they had to acknowledge yet another division, this time between North and South. In the 7th century, Arab armies swept through the Middle East and North Africa with astonishing speed, creating an immense Islamic caliphate. Where one civilization once thrived, now there were 3: Islamic, Byzantine, and medieval. For a brief moment in the 8th century, it seemed as if the fragile and weak West might be overwhelmed by the caliphate. Muslim armies crushed the Visigothic kingdom in Spain, then went on to raid Francia. But in 732, in the Battle of Tours, they were defeated by the Franks under the leadership of Charles Martel. Islamic expansion in the West was halted, and the victorious Charles gave his name to a dynasty that was to change European history forever, the Carolingians. Charles Martel's son, Pepin the Short, seized the Frankish throne in a coup. He fought the Lombards in Italy, granting the Pope his own most desired autonomous state. Pepin's son was the famous Charlemagne. After ascending the Frankish throne in 768, he spent decades fighting and expanding his kingdom. Ultimately, he held sway over most of Western Christendom. In 800 CE, Pope Leo III anointed Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans. More than 300 years after the fall of Rome, the West had an emperor once again. The Carolingian Empire was the first great power of the medieval West, leaving an enduring legacy. Charlemagne backed an intellectual and cultural flowering, the first of several medieval renaissances intending to revive the lost knowledge and culture of antiquity. The empire disseminated throughout the West various political structures, institutions, titles, ranks, ideas, and dreams, most importantly, an ideal of a unified Christian West. These formed the bedrock of medieval civilization. The Carolingian Empire was short-lived. The attempt to create centralized rule in the West suffered from insufficient infrastructure, small cities, weak economy, limited bureaucracy, and poor communications. After Charlemagne's death, his three grandsons fought one another, and in 843, in the Treaty of Verdun, divided the Frankish Empire among themselves. The Middle Kingdom quickly diminished, leaving only West Francia, which would eventually become France, and East Francia, which will one day become Germany. These kingdoms continued to splinter and fragment, a process accelerated by external pressure. In the 9th and 10th centuries, a new wave of invaders attacked the crumbling Carolingian world from every direction. The Vikings came from the north, roaming the coasts and rivers of Europe, raiding and terrorizing the population. The Magyars, better known as Hungarians, rode in from the east, plundering defenseless settlements. And finally, Muslim pirates and raiders landed on Europe's southern shores. Europe was under siege. As the West was crumbling under repeated attacks, kings lost their power while local elites grew stronger. Europe was getting covered with a dense network of wooden castles serving as fortified residences of local noble families. From these strongholds, lords subjugated the peasants in their vicinity, extracting their resources. Lords ruled their lands by coercive force. In previous centuries, peasants were an integral part of infantry armies, but new military innovations such as the stirrup further established cavalry as a decisive force. This new kind of warfare required resources only nobles could obtain. Consequently, European elites became full-time professional fighters. In a world ruled by a warrior nobility, territorial power was attained by vassalage. One noble granted another land and protection, and expected in return his fealty and military service. Kingdoms were becoming complex networks of personal relationships and mutual obligations. Kings were often weak and could be easily overshadowed by their strong vassals. This is often described as the feudal system. Centuries would pass before centralized states would emerge again in the West. In the 10th century, things started to change. Better climate increased agricultural yield, external invasions ceased as Vikings and Hungarians settled down and were absorbed into Western Christendom, and in some regions, royal authority was gaining ground. In Britain, King Alfred the Great and his successors unified the various Anglo-Saxon realms, creating the Kingdom of England for the first time. In West Francia, while political fragmentation continued, Vikings who settled in the north swore loyalty to the Frankish